Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. Chapter 8. Sophie needed to pass. She wanted the proper education Fitz had mentioned. She wanted to learn how the world really worked. So she closed her eyes, trying to relax enough to concentrate. She reached out with her mind like she had the day before. Bronte's mind felt different from Fitz's deeper. Somehow, like she was stretching her mental shadow much further. And she and when she finally felt his thoughts, they were more like an icy gust than a gentle breeze. "You're thinking that you're the only one at this table with any common sense," she announced. "And you're tired of watching Kenrick stare at Orelai." Bronte's jaw fell open, and Kenrick's face turned as red as his hair. Orelai looked down at her plate, her cheeks flushing pink. "I take it that's right?" Alden asked, hiding his smile behind his hand. Bronte nodded, looking angry, chagrined, and incredulous, all at the same time. "How can that be? An ancient mine is almost impenetrable." "The key word in that sentence is almost," Alden reminded him. "Don't feel bad. She's also reached Fitz's blocking." Guilt tugged at Sophie's conscience as she watched Fitz flush red, especially when Bronte grinned and said, "Sounds like Alden's golden boy isn't as infallible as everyone thinks. It's more like Sophie is exceptionally special," Alden corrected. "Fitz also saw her lift more than ten times her weight with telekinesis yesterday." "You're kidding!" Kenrick gasped, recovering from his embarrassment. "At her age! Now that I have to see." Sophie shrank in her chair. "But I don't know how I did it. It just sort of happened." "Just relax, Sophie. Why not try something small?" Alden pointed to the crystal goblet in front of her. "That didn't sound too hard." And maybe it was like her telepathy, another sense she had to learn how to use. She replayed the accident, remembering the way she'd found the strength deep inside and pushed it out through her fingers. Could she do it again? She raised her arm and imagined lifting the goblet with an invisible hand. Nothing happened for a second, and her arms started to sweat. Then something pulled in her stomach, and the glass floated off the table. She stared at the goblet in wonder. "I did it!" "That's it," Bronte scoffed, unimpressed. "He needed more? Seriously? Give her a second. She's still getting used to her ability." Alden put his hand on her shoulder. "Take a deep breath and relax. Then see what else you can do. And remember, your mind has no limitation, unlike your physical body." Alden's calm confidence gave her the courage to try harder. She tried to think about the clue he was giving her. No limitations. What did that mean? Maybe she could lift more than one thing at a time. She blew out a breath, pretending she had 5 more imaginary hands to extend. The tug in her gut felt sharper, but it was worth it. Then the other 5 goblets rose like crystal flying saucers. Kenrick applauded. "Excellent control!" Her cheeks grew warm with the praise. "Thanks." Bronte snorted. "It's a couple of glasses. I thought she was supposed to be able to lift 10 times her body weight." Sophie bit her lip. She wasn't sure how much more she could handle. but she was determined to impress Bronte. She must be stronger than she realized. How else could she have stopped the lantern? She took another deep breath and shoved every ounce of the force she could feel in her core towards the empty chair next to Bronte. A collective gasp rang in the air as three chairs floated off the ground, including the one Bronte sat on. Incredible, Alden breathed. Sophie didn't have time to celebrate. Her stomach cramped from the strain and her hold broke. She screamed as the goblets shattered against the table and the chairs crashed to the floor, knocking Bronte flat on his back with a thunderous collision. For a second, no one said anything. They just stared in open-mouthed shock. But when Bronte hollered for someone to help him up, everyone burst into a fit of laughter. Except Sophie. She dropped one of the counselors. She was pretty sure she'd sealed her future with that mistake. Kendrick clapped her on the back, pulling her out of her worries. I've never seen such natural talent. You're even a natural at a language. Your accent is perfect, almost as perfect as these guys. He pointed to Alden and Fitz. I'm sorry, what? She asked, assuming she'd heard him wrong. Fitz laughed. You've been speaking the enlightened language since we lived here, just like you did yesterday. She was speaking a different language? With an accent? Our language is instinctive, Alden explained. We speak from birth. I'm sure people thought you were an interesting baby, though to humans our language sounds like babbling. Her parents were always teasing her about what a noisy baby she was. She gripped the table. Is there a word that sounds like soybean in English? Soybean? Alden asked. I used to say it as a baby. My parents thought I was trying to say my name and mispronouncing it. They even turned it into a nickname, a really annoying one. She blushed when Fitz chuckled beside her. Kenrick shrugged. I can't think of what that would be. Fitz and Orlai nodded, but Alden looked pale. What is it? Bronte asked him, still dusting off his cape from his fall. Alden waved the words away. Probably nothing. I'll decide if it's nothing, Bronte insisted. Alden sighed. It's possible. She was saying sulring, but it's a stretch. Bronte's mouth tightened into a hard line. What does sulring mean? Sophie asked. Alden hesitated before he answered. It's the proper name for a moonlark, a rare species of birds. And that's bad because she hated the way everyone was looking at her, like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Adults were always looking at her that way, but usually she could hear their thoughts and know why they were so bothered. She missed that now. It's not bad, it's just interesting, Alden said quietly. Bronte snorted. Troubling is what it is. Why would it be troubling? Sophie asked. It would be an uncomfortable coincidence, but most likely you were trying to say your name. You were hearing it all the time, so it's natural that you would try to repeat it, Alden said. Alden said it like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Well, I think I've heard quite enough to make my decision, Bronte barked, shoving all thoughts of moonlarks out of her mind. I vote against, and you will not convince me otherwise. Sophie wasn't surprised, but she couldn't fight off her panic. Had she failed? Kenrick shook his head. You're being absurd, Bronte. I vote in favor, and you won't convince me otherwise. She held her breath as all eyes turned to Orelai for the final vote. Orelai hadn't said a word the entire time. Sophie had no idea where she stood. "Give me your hand, Sophie," Orelai said in a voice as fragile and lovely as her face. Orelai is an empath, Fitz explained. She can feel your emotions. Sophie's arm shook as she extended her hand. Orelai grasped it with a delicate touch. "I feel a lot of fear and confusion," Orelai whispered, "but I've never felt such sincerity. And there's something else. I'm not sure I can describe it." She opened her huge azure eyes and stared at Sophie. "You may have my vote." Alden clapped his hands together with a huge grin. "That settles it then." "For now," Bronte corrected. "This will be revisited. I'll make sure of it." Alden's smile faded. Then, "We should wait till the end of the year. Give Sophie some time to adjust," Kenrick announced. "Excellent," Alden agreed. "Fools," Bronte grumbled. "I invoke my right as senior counselor to demand a probe." Alden rose with a nod. "I'd planned as much. I've arranged to bring her to Quinlan as soon as we're done here." Sophie knew she should probably celebrate, but she was too busy trying to decipher the word probe. "That didn't sound fun. What's a probe?" she asked Fitz as Alden led everyone else out of the room. Fitz leaned back in his chair. "Just a different way to read your mind. It's no big deal. Happens all the time when you're in telepathy training, which it looks like you'll be. I can't believe you passed. It looked iffy there for a minute." "I know," she sighed. "Why did Bronte demand a probe?" "Because he's a pain. Well, that and I think he's worried that my dad couldn't read your mind." "Worried?" "I guess maybe bothered is a better word. My dad's really good. And so am I." He flashed a cocky smile. "So if we can't read your mind, it's kind of like, who can?" "Okay," she said, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "But why does he care if no one can read my mind?" "Probably because of your upbringing." She took a deep breath, reluctant to say the next words. "You mean the fact that my family is human, and I'm not?" A second passed before he nodded. Emptiness exploded inside her. So it wasn't a mistake. She really wasn't related to her family. And Fitz knew he wouldn't look at her, and she could tell he was uncomfortable. She choked down the pain, saving it for later, when she'd be able to deal with it in private. She cleared her throat, trying to sound normal. Why would that concern him? Because it's never happened before. The warm, bright room felt suddenly colder. Never. No. It was a tiny word, but the implications it carried were huge. Why was she living with humans? Before she could ask, Alden swept back into the room. "Sophie, why don't you come with me, and we'll get you something else to wear? You'd better change too, Fitz." Sophie hesitated. She should probably make them take her home. Her parents had to know by now that she ditched school. Then again, she was already in trouble. Might as well stall the punishment as long as possible. Plus, she wasn't ready to go home yet. She needed more answers. "Where are we going?" she asked as she followed Alden out of the room. Alden smiled. "How would you like to see Atlantis?"